I was born March 9 in Sioux Falls, March 9, 1949 in Sioux Falls. I grew up on a farm east of Sioux Falls on the Iowa and Minnesota borders. My father's father came from Norway at 16 in about 1885, and he moved to that area east of Sioux Falls, around Valley Springs, Ben Clair, Rowena area. And my other grandfather, Timothy O'Hara, worked at Morales and Meatpacking. My grandfathers were Lars Severson and Timothy O'Hara. It was an interesting upbringing. Actually, my father was you could easily call him a bachelor Norwegian farmer. He didn't get married till he was about 40, so my grandfather on his side, both my grandparents passed away before I was born. I met my wife in school. I was in law school, and we met having coffee one morning. Mary, maiden name was Schweitzer. She's from Timberlake, South Dakota, and we were married. We both graduated the same day. She was from undergraduate, and I was from law school, and we got married 2 weeks later, and we both got jobs in Huron, so we moved to Huron. My children, Tom is an engineer, graduated from School of Mines and lives in Wichita, Kansas. He works as an engineer in aircraft design and testing. And my daughter Catherine just graduated with a master's in nursing from Penn and lives in Philadelphia. I have two sisters, Evelyn Crowley and Carol Smith, and a brother, Paul Severson. I think important in life, just hard work and honesty, and that's just the way I grew up, a typical South Dakota farm boy. My father was born in 1902 and went to rural school and then some high school, but then dropped out of high school and actually went to business college without finishing high school. And it was always just assumed that we would go to school. I went to Brandon Valley, felt it was a very good school. It was a lot smaller then than it is now. As a result, that we were all drawn into a lot of activities. So I have a very broad background with athletics and music and everything that happens in a small town. I think it added to my background. I think I probably had early years in school. I certainly didn't excel, and then later grade school I started to pay a little more attention to what school was all about. Enjoyed it.
Did you go to college during your time in the military, or
yes?
That, okay, and where did you go?
University of South Dakota.
Okay, and what did you study there?
Business and political science. My major is political science. I graduated in 3.5 years with some transfer of credit from my military schools and a fairly heavy caseload. I had a high school English teacher, Mrs. Josendahl, that I still remember a lot of the things that she taught us. Dr. W.O. Farber was the department head at university, and he's taken a number of kind of wandering young students and kind of channeled them. You know, he's known for that. Now Monsignor James Doyle also was there at the time, and I was a janitor actually at the church, the Newman Center, and lived there as another one of my jobs during school. Well, I graduated in the middle of the year, and then I moved to Georgia for a short period, around January or February. I had a sister living there, so I just got a job working in a factory. Worked as a mechanic in a factory in Columbus, Georgia. While I was waiting for on my applications for law school, I didn't find a job doing much of anything else, and so that's what I did during that. And I think that was good to get out of school a short period of time anyway and refocus to get ready to go on to grad school. I went right out of high school into South Dakota Air National Guard, partly because of my science and math. I tested into and was sent to electronic school for approximately a year. And then I worked on autopilots and instruments for 6 years in the Guard while I was in college and law school. I was in 67, 68, and that was the period where Martin Luther King was shot. In fact, I was in Chicago the day that he was shot. Was also Robert Kennedy was shot. That was a period where I think Kent State was that year. You read many articles about 1968. It was pretty tumultuous. It was a very confusing time. And you know, there's a article in Time magazine. They had a whole issue that they just came out with about 1968 and what that was like. Right. I was just in for a short period, 6 years. I got out as a staff sergeant. At that time, the mission there was to fly interceptors. So they had armed aircraft at the end of the runway in Sioux Falls there, you know, all the time, so we didn't go anywhere. Chief Justice Gilbertson and Justice Zinner and I were classmates. And Justice Conenkamp, I think, was 1 year ahead, and Justice Wilbur was 2 years behind, so we were all in school at the same time. I had no experience with law, I had no connection to it, so it was pretty disorienting and intimidating for me, particularly at the beginning, after you're in it for a while. But I really didn't know what I was getting myself into, and so it was challenging. Right. We had some good professors, probably young Professor Davis was there a couple of years, Professor Brodsky at Garton, and Dean Adams. He taught freshman torts and was an experienced trial lawyer, a retired trial lawyer, and he made things very challenging, and I actually learned a lot from his challenges to us. At the end of the first year, as law school was structured then, probably still is, that there really aren't many tests at all until the end of the year, and you have each course about 4 or 5 questions and 4 hours to answer it. Whatever you do there is your grade for the entire year, and I thought I had failed, and I was actually starting to pack up at the end of the first year thinking, okay, now what am I going to do? I don't know what, I started thinking about it actually. In high school I thought I would probably go into science or engineering, and then I went to Boise State, and it kind of intrigued me, and I started thinking about it at that point. And that's what planted the seed thinking about it. The law school at that time, I think, was it was a good basis because we had reasonably small classes. I think our class was in the neighborhood of 65 maybe to 70, and most of our classes, particularly the first 2 years, were split. So there were 30 in a class, and there was nowhere to hide. You were going to be called on, and so you better be ready. It was economically kind of a depressed time in 1975, and I got a job as a deputy state's attorney. My wife was a Spanish teacher, or a language teacher. She taught Spanish, French, and German in her career. So there were very few language teaching jobs either, and we just happened to get jobs in Huron. We thought we'd be there a couple of years, and we ended up staying there 18 years. I went from a job with the state's attorney's office and was shortly, within about 7 or 8 months, I was hired by a firm, and then practiced with that firm, and another lawyer and I formed another partnership later. It was initially Benson, Beach, Weed, and Martin, and then Fingerson and Severson. It was a very broad, small town practice. I did some business work and did a lot of real estate work, some trial work. I was city attorney for 15 years. I was a hospital attorney. In 1993, Governor Mickelson appointed me to the circuit court, and that was back in Minnehaha County where I grew up. And I was on the circuit court bench for 16 years, and then Governor Rounds appointed me to the Supreme Court. In South Dakota at this point, it's been very nonpartisan. I have not been particularly active in any political parties. I've had various registrations through various parts of my life. So I think in South Dakota it has maintained that up to this point. I'd never really thought about it. I was practicing law and supporting my family and trying to keep the law firm prosperous and doing what we needed to keep everyone paid and expand the type of practice we did and the technologies we were using. And then one of the judges I was in before a fair amount, Judge Irv Hoyt, was appointed to the federal bench, the bankruptcy court, and he called me one day and told me that he wanted to talk with me, and we sat down. He said, "You should apply for this," and it never even had occurred to me before that. And so I did, and I didn't get that position. But then Governor Mickelson called me and told me he wasn't appointing me, but that I should not give it up and should apply again. So actually it was probably 4 years later, I did apply for one position. I did that for 16 years. We rotated through, we handled everything that a trial court handles, from juvenile to criminal and trials of all felonies. Most serious felonies, we heard those. Civil cases, I had a lot of civil background, so I enjoyed that and did a lot of my time doing civil trial work. And then when Justice Meyer Henry was appointed to the Supreme Court, she was the presiding judge at that point, and then I took over as presiding judge, so I had the administrative work as well. Yes, same process actually as how I was appointed to the circuit bench. Applied to the Judicial Qualifications Commission and submit writing samples and go for an interview, and then they do background checks, and then they send some number of names from at least I think 3 up to, depends on the time, to the governor.
Right.
They narrow it down. It's the ability really to do things right, to particularly the panel I'm with now, everyone really works hard at studying the issues, understanding the issues, and getting what we're comfortable with is the right decision under the law. Doesn't always mean that if we had infinite amount of discretion and could decide it the way we really felt, that it wouldn't be a different decision, but that isn't what our job is.